Hey guys, welcome to That Florida Feeling. I hope everybody's having a great week. It's actually finally stopped raining in Florida. It's amazing. We're back to being the Sunshine State. Thanks to everybody who's interacted with the social media pages. I really appreciate it as always. You guys are amazing. Really taken to the TikTok, so thank you. I love meeting all of you guys on TikTok Live. If you got to see the live the other day from the fort in St. Augustine, that was insane with the dolphins and the fish. I really appreciate you guys getting on there. It's always fun to meet other Floridians. It seems like a lot of us get on there. Um, Thank you to everybody who keeps giving me some amazing suggestions for some episodes. Those are coming out really soon. I've got them all together. I've just got to get them recorded, and they'll be out probably within the next month or so. Spooky season is coming up in the next week. Gosh, we're gonna start our October episodes. If you have any suggestions for haunted places, let me know. I do have a couple episodes already together for spooky season. Of course, we have murderers in Florida. We have some haunted places. But if you have any suggestions, let me know. I can always fit it in. But don't forget to check out Unfiltered Studios, guys. There's a lot of amazing other podcasters out there. You'll see me feature them on my Instagram stories because they're awesome people. They have some great podcasts, and you should definitely give them a listen if you're looking to add to your podcast library. Today, guys, we're going to talk about what I affectionately refer to as one of the snowbird havens of Florida. And it's kind of in the Miami corridor. It's called Delray Beach. I'm sure you've heard of it if you've ever been towards Miami. In fact, Delray Beach sometimes often gets confused for Miami, as it's only 52 miles north of Miami. It's in Palm Beach County. The population is like 70-ish thousand. It fluctuates, of course, between October and March, depending on snowbirds and spring breakers. Both of those tend to affect their population. So, what all is known about Delray Beach, other than old and rich and sometimes famous? It's actually got quite a long history. The earliest known inhabitants of what is now Delray Beach were and I can't say this, but it's going to be the people that the Jobe sound was named after. So it's the Jobe, so it'd be Jobe in Spanish. They were the ones to first inhabit this area. The Tequesta Indians likely passed through or also inhabited the area or around the area at various times, but these people mainly settled around Jupiter to just north of Miami, so to kind of the Tequesta. But these were the main inhabitants of this area before the settlers really came through. A few details really survived. They didn't really, we don't really have a ton of stuff to go on about these people other than really what the Spanish wrote, which sucks because I'm sure they had a really cool culture from what we know about them. But this is likely the earliest inhabitants of this area. In 1841, huge jump in time, U.S. military maps do show a Seminole camp located in the area now known as Lake Ida. In 1876, the United States Life-Saving Service, which is kind of like pre-Coast Guard, built Orange Grove House of Refuge, which would have been a house that operated on the coast that would have been there to rescue and shelter shipwrecked sailors. There's still one that survives today, Gilbert's House of Refuge, towards Stewart. But they did have one in Delray, Orange Grove House of Refuge. It was there to rescue and shelter shipwrecked sailors. And the house derived its name from a grove of mature sour orange and other tropical fruit trees found at the site that was chosen for the House of Refuge, but no record or evidence of who planted the trees was discovered, so we don't know who started this fruit grove, but that's how it got its name. The first non-indigenous group to build a settlement was a party of African Americans from the Panhandle of Florida who moved and purchased land from it was a little inland. It wasn't quite on the beach, and it wasn't quite near the House of Refuge, so it was a little bit more inland. But they began farming that area around 1884. And about 10 years later, in about 1894, the black community was actually large enough to establish their first school in the area. So this community actually grew pretty large in that area. That was the first non-indigenous settlement. In 1894, William S. Linton, a Republican U.S. congressman from Saginaw, Michigan, also bought a tract of land west of the House of Refuge and began selling plots in what he would hope would become a farming community. And this community was named after Linton. And in 1896, our favorite person to save Florida, Mr. Henry Flagler himself, extended his Florida East Coast Railway south from West Palm Beach to Miami with a station at Linton. So this began to also grow the area. Now, the Linton settlement actually also began to grow as well. It even established a post office and a store, and it began to achieve success with a truck. They got trucks. They began to farm. They got really successful in the winter vegetables, especially for the northern markets. So they would truck them up north and sell them. And they did really, really well for a couple years until a really hard freeze actually came all the way south through Florida in 1898. And that was a major setback, even in South Florida. And it actually discouraged a lot of people. And a lot of settlers left, including William Linton. The guy founded it, was like, yeah, nope, I'm out. So he left. Okay, that doesn't sound great for the person who settled it, but sure, he's out too. And partly in an attempt to change the community's luck or just to leave behind a bad reputation, they decided to say, screw you, we're changing our name. So in 1901, it was named Delray, after the Detroit neighborhood of Delray. Delray being the I cannot say this word right now for some reason, angelicized spelling of Delray, which would have been two words, which is Spanish for of the king, which was in turn named after the Mexican-American War's Battle of the Molino del Rey. Sure. Okay. So it was named after a neighborhood in Detroit because they didn't like the guy that left. I can see that. I can totally see that. So the area continued to grow even after that hard freeze, and settlers from the Bahamas, which was then part of the British West Indies, sometime referred to as Nassaus. Well, that's kind of rude. They referred to Bahamians as Nassaus. I didn't know that till right now. Sorry. They began to arrive in the early 1900s because, remember, even though Florida has been part of the U.S. since like the 1820s, people didn't really start settling it until later on. So after 1905, newspaper articles and photographs of Delray events revealed that Japanese settlers from nearby Yamato farming... I'm sorry. Yamato made me think of Ninja Turtles. I'm sorry. If you got that reference, thank you. So the nearby Yamato farming colony also began participating in Delray civic activities such as parades, going to movies, and shopping. So you have a very interesting mixture in this part of Florida. You have the African American community, you have the Northerners that have come down, you have the Bahamians, and now you have the Japanese. So it's a very interesting mixture. And if you go down there to this day, you can still see that this mixture has influenced Delray. And it's really cool. I'll talk about it in a second. The 1910 census actually shows that Delray was a town of 904 citizens, so it was growing. 24 U.S. states and 9 other countries were actually listed as birthplace of these residents. So, very interesting mixture. And even though it was a small town, it really was diverse. In 1911, the area was actually chartered by the state of Florida as an unincorporated town. In the same year, the pineapple and tomato canning plants were actually built in the area. Pineapples became the primary crop in the area, and it reflected the name of present-day Pineapple Grove neighborhood near downtown Delray Beach. Now, prior to 1909, Delray settlement land was actually in Dade County. Dade County was huge. That year, though, Palm Beach County was carved out of the northern part of the region. In 1915, Palm Beach County and Dade County contributed nearly equal portions of land to what is now Broward County between the two, leaving Delray situated in the southeastern portion of Palm Beach County as it is today. Now, by 1920, Delray's population continued to grow. They're at almost 1,100. In the 1920s, the drainage of the Everglades west of Delray lowered the water table, and it actually made it harder to grow pineapples. Pineapples have to have like a soggy area. And the extension of the Florida East Coast Railway to Key West resulted in competition for Cuban pineapples, and it kind of really messed up the market for them. This also was populated with the Florida land boom of the 1920s, and people began to notice Delray a little bit more. Tourism and real estate speculations brought a lot more people to Delray, and it became a lot bigger to their economy, especially the tourism aspect of it, as they are on the beach. Delray actually began to issue bonds to raise money to install water and sewer lines, began to pave the streets, began to make sidewalks, and began to make it a nice place where people would want to visit. Hotels began to be built, places that people would want to go, restaurants, things like that. And at the time, Delray was actually the largest town on the east coast of Florida between West Palm and Fort Lauderdale. But the land boom died in 1926, which meant Delray was now saddled with huge bond debts and greatly reduced income from property taxes. So, yeah, there's kind of a problem. Now, Delray is actually, it's on the beach, but it's not completely kind of on the beach. It's really strange. So Delray was separated by the Atlantic Ocean, or the Atlantic, yeah, so it's going to be the ocean. So it's Ocean Beach, by the Florida East Coast Canal, which is now the Intercoastal Waterway. For those of you who don't know, the Intercoastal Waterway actually runs all the way up from Boston, mostly around Florida. So that entire East Coast is going to have that waterway that you see, which is why if you want to go to the beach in most spots, you will have to drive over a bridge to get to an actual quote-unquote beach. In 1923, the area between the canal and the ocean was incorporated as Delray Beach. And in 1927, Delray and Delray Beach merged into one town now named Delray Beach. So it's growing, it's merging, things are happening. The land boom is over with. Tourism is still kind of there. But that's not a bad thing. Change is still good. In the mid-1920s, a seasonal artist and writers colony actually established itself in Delray Beach, adjacent to the town of Gulfstream. And Gulfstream was a really, really tiny little town at that time. I think it actually still exists to this day. But at the time, the city of Palm Beach did not really welcome Hollywood personalities or artists. So Delray did. Delray's like, well, there's people, they're spending money, let them in. They were fine with these bohemian and eclectic types because it meant people and it meant people spending money. Makes sense to me. So throughout the 1930s and 40s, it became a really popular, we'll say, snowbird home for artists and authors. And it even became a place for cartoonists, nationally syndicated cartoonists, including H.T. Webster, who created Caspar Miliquitost. I can't say that one, but it's something like that. And then Fontaine Fox of Toonerville Trolley. I've heard of that one. They actually had upstairs offices at the arcade building over the arcade tap room. And that was really kind of a cool thing because, I mean, these places became gathering places where artists and writers would be joined by aristocrats, politicians, entertainers, sports figures, and they would just hang out or talk or gather ideas. Other well-known artists and writers of the area who actually had homes in Delray Beach would include Herb Roth, W.J. Pat Enright, Robert Bernstein, Wood Cowan, Jim Raymond, Charles Williams, Nina Wilcox Putnam, and Edna St. Vincent Millay, just to name a few. And of course, these seasonal visitors really kind of help soften the effect of the real estate boom. And also, this is still the Great Depression. And these people coming to visit really kind of lessened the effects of this because they were still coming and they were still spending some money and they were still not having such a bad economy down there because of this. Now, of course, during the Depression, things were still bad. Not much money was available since two banks had actually failed. But the town still kept going. It still looked prosperous because previous bust of new buildings during the boom years made it still look new. Of course, the artist and writer colonies actually flourished, and Delray's fame as a resort town actually kept it going. And this is kind of what they call Delray Beach's golden era or golden age of architecture. And this is a period in which the city ranked 50th in population, but 10th in building permits in Florida, which is pretty good, especially during a depression when probably nobody else is building anything. Of course, prominent architecture styles do vary in Delray Beach, and that's what's kind of cool about it. You'll see anything from Art Deco to Mediterranean to Mission Revival. You'll see Steamline Modern, bungalows, even Key West. And the Key West style modern, those cottage homes that you're used to in Key West that are in Delray Beach are really more of the artist and writer colony winter residents. And I think that's pretty cool. Now, of course, Delray survived the Depression and kept going. And of course, they survived it. We had World War I and World War II. And for the 4 years of World War II, the citizens of Delray volunteered to watch the beach because, nobody knew what was going to happen. And they would watch the beach and the ocean 24 hours a day from a faux bell tower atop of the Seaside Seacrest Hotel. Military personnel patrolled the beach on horseback. Shipping attacks could be seen from the coast. And during World War II, Delray Beach also saw an influx of service personnel stationed at nearby Boca Raton Army Airfield. Some veterans who had trained at the airfield returned to settle in Delray Beach after the war, and the city never really saw a downturn in growth. Like, they never stopped growing, even from that failed land boom and depression. They just kept growing. So while Delray Beach continued to grow, and they did have a sizable African-American population, they did have kind of a little bit of an issue. They did try to keep the Jews out, much like Miami did. In 1959, the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith called it one of the nation's most completely anti-Semitic communities. So Delray Beach was not a very welcoming community to the Jews. It quoted an unnamed realtor who proudly called it the only city on the east coast of Florida fully restricted to just Gentiles in both buying and selling. I don't know that I'd be very happy to say that. I don't know that I'd be proud of that either. By the early 1960s, Delray Beach was becoming known for surfing, as there are actually some pretty good waves down there. Atlantic Avenue was one of the biggest sellers of surfboards in Florida at the time. Delray Beach's surfing fame actually increased massively after a 1965 shipwreck. And of course, that is because of Hurricane Betsy. The 441-foot freighter Amaryllis ran aground on Singer Island that created a windbreak that formed massively perfect breaking waves. The ship was dismantled 3 years later, but local surfers still retain an association to the area. So, thanks to Hurricane Betsy, Delray Beach got another claim to fame. Of course, in the 1970s, they got a little more bump because of I-95. I-95 between Palm Beach Gardens and Miami was fully completed, and development spread west of the city limits. The pattern continued and accelerated through the 1980s, as downtown and many of the older neighborhoods did fall kind of through decline because people were moving. They were moving out of that. Most big cities tend to see this, especially through growth. But revitalization did happen in some of the historic areas, especially in the late 1990s, early 2000s. Local landmarks have been renovated, including the Colonial Hotel. The Old School Square is another one that's actually been renovated. It's actually pretty cool. It's a 5-acre site, and it's kind of part of the shopping district, and it's absolutely beautiful. They've also taken former schools and turned them into cultural centers, which is really nice because they're repurposing things. The city also actually has 5 historic districts in the town, and they are listed on the local Register of Historic Places. They also have a couple other places of historic residential neighborhoods that are between US 1 and the Intercoastal Waterway, and that's to preserve the distinctive local architecture. And I told you that there was a lot of different architecture, so that's not surprising. In 2001, the historic home of teacher principal Solomon D. Spady was renovated and turned into the Spady Cultural Heritage Museum. And this is actually a really cool building. This is another one of those forms of interesting architecture, but the museum is really cool because it's an African American history museum. And because he was a prominent African American educator in the community from 1922 to 1957. So it's very cool that they, not only saved his house, but they preserved the history and in his memory. So it's really cool. And it does house it houses Black archives. There's a lot of great history in there. And in 2007, the museum was expanded by renovating the 1935 cottage as a kids' cultural clubhouse. There's also construction of a 50-seat amphitheater named for C. Spencer Pompey, which is a pioneer Black educator as well. So they've really done a lot to preserve that history, especially in that area. Now, you can go to downtown Delray, and that's located in the eastern part of the city on Atlantic Avenue, which is going to be east of I-95, and it goes to the beach. And there's a lot of gentrification that's been done. It was a little bit run down. It's actually starting to look a lot better. And they've done a lot of really cool stuff. They actually have a really cool, huge tennis center. The Delray Beach Tennis Center has actually brought a lot of stuff to the area. It was actually opened in 1974. Then they added a stadium in 1992, and it actually holds about 8,000, I think, spectators. And they host the Delray Beach Open. But they've also hosted some major events. In April of 2005, they had the Fed Cup, and in April of 2004, they had the Davis Cup. So, they do actually have quite a few big events come through. So, they have a lot of good things happening in Delray Beach. And it's a really nice area, and I think it often gets overlooked because it is so close to Miami. It's just in that Miami corridor, and it's often overlooked, and you just kind of drive through it, and you blink, and you don't even think about it. Now, I will say that Delray Beach does have some not good things going for it. Unfortunately, Delray Beach is kind of known for being a city of halfway houses. I just feel I need to tell you guys this as well. They kind of are the center of the opioid epidemic in that part of Florida. There are a huge concentration of halfway houses throughout the city. I remember they had massive spikes in right before 2020 down there. You always hear stuff coming out of it, and it's from fentanyl. And there's just, every time I go down there, I know that there's a bunch of halfway houses down there from just working in that area and hearing about it. And so don't get me wrong, there are parts of Delray Beach that are really, really, really nice, but there are just parts you got to watch out for. And I know that's every city, but I don't want you guys thinking oh, I'm going to go to Delray Beach. Just don't go traipsing through every neighborhood you see, guys. That's a really honest statement. But it's a really beautiful city. It really is. It's amazing. And it's got some really cool places to visit. You can go to some really cool places. They have the Loxahatchee National Wildlife Refuge, which is right next to it, which is close to the Everglades. It borders the Everglades. So you'll get to see some really cool wildlife in the area. And it's in the middle of Florida's Gold Coast, which is the Miami metropolitan area. So, you're going to see some beautiful sunsets and some amazing beaches. And of course, the downtown area sits on the Intercoastal Waterway, and you get to see some really beautiful stuff there. Some really nice boats too. Watch the yachts as they go by. And one of the really cool places that I think is hidden in Delray that most people don't talk about is the Murakami Museum and Japanese Gardens. And that really comes from the diversity that I was talking about when they first founded the city. And the Murakami Museum and Japanese Gardens is a center for Japanese arts and culture. And I've actually talked about it in one of my earlier podcasts. It's a campus that includes 2 museum buildings and Japanese gardens. It's got a bonsai garden. It's got a restaurant. And it's absolutely beautiful. It's named after George Murakami. who was actually from Japan, and he donated his farm to Palm Beach County to be used as a park. He was the only member of the Yamato colony in Florida to stay in Delray Beach after World War II. And of course, you understand this because of World War II. He originally proposed donating the land to the city of Delray, which was declined, but eventually it happened. And the museum was opened in 1977, and a building that is now named Yamato-kan. And it's absolutely beautiful. You know, Murakami Park is about 200. It's about 189 acres. And if you are looking for a place to walk around and to experience, you know, peacefulness and to be able to just take in Japanese history, this is a place you want to go. I mean, there are more than 7,000 artifacts that make up this collection. You can really get to see some cool history. You can take in some beautiful gardens. You know, they have the rock garden, the bonsai trees. There's a beautiful bridge. There's a tea house. There's lakes. Of course, there's a restaurant. So I definitely recommend checking out the Murakami Museum if you are in Delray. This is one of those, I would definitely hit up this place if I was going to go there to go anywhere else. Because it's really cool. And I do think it's often overlooked when people talk about Delray. Because, of course, when you think of Delray, you think of, oh, okay, it's close to Miami. It's old people. It's rich people. It's 95, and I'm going to sit in traffic for 10 hours, and nobody knows how to drive. And I'll be happy if I just make it there. But no, I think this is an often overlooked, very beautiful place that I think, you know, doesn't get enough credit. And so I always like to talk about that one. And of course, the city itself does have a lot more parks that you can visit, you know, the local parks, just to check out. And of course, they have golf courses and tennis if you're like down there just looking for something to do. And of course, the beaches are absolutely beautiful. I definitely recommend checking them out. They're actually some of the really prettier beaches, the very clear water. The fish do swim very close to you. Very close. I was not prepared for that. I will tell you right now. Like, I just was not. And another cool thing they do down there is they do have a lot of playgrounds for kids. That's one thing that Florida does really well, is they do have a lot of facilities for families, for kids, and walking trails down there, and splash pads and things like that. So Delray Beach is a really cool community. It's a really great community. It's got a long history. It's survived through a lot of history, the Depression, the land boom, a lot of things that a lot of Florida didn't survive through. And so I feel it's often overlooked, and I always want to give those little towns that we can still go visit today with its long history just a little bit of credit. So hope you guys had fun listening to that. No Florida man today. Florida man's just doing bad stuff. Not like funny bad stuff, just bad stuff. Oh no, actually I did see one this morning. Florida man was stopped by cops for speeding and then ended up snorting all his cocaine so that they wouldn't find it, and the cop saw it on his nose. Yep. And that was in Jacksonville. Why wouldn't it be? Saw that on the local news this morning. So, there's your Florida man story for today. Thank you, local news, for being on in the background when I was doing other things. So, don't be Florida man. And if you do speed, just maybe don't have cocaine on you, or don't snort it all. I would love to know how that went afterwards. Actually, I can only imagine. All right, guys, thanks for listening this week. Again, if you have any suggestions, you can hit me up on any of the social medias or email me on thatfloridafeel@gmail.com. Yeah, just if you have a second, I would appreciate a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. Those just help get the podcast out to everybody else. I hope you guys have a great week. Wear your sunscreen. It's still hot and sunny here, so, do that. Drink your water. Be nice to one another, guys. And as always, guys, that's your daily dose of sunshine.
This podcast is a production of Unfiltered Studios. If you would like to know more about joining Unfiltered Studios, please visit our website at unfpod.com for more information.